And I always think the irony in trusting a system that did not empower you to teach your own children and pass on your knowledge is the same system that you're trusting to somehow give that to your children.
Welcome to the Marvelous Moms Club podcast, where you'll be not only allowed, but encouraged to dream big dreams and imagine the very best future for yourself and your family. Throw away expectations and perfection and embrace the messy beauty of what it means to be a marvelous mom. I'm your host, Kirsten Tyrell, and I can't wait to help you discover what makes you marvelous. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode today. So I just want to preface this that originally I had mentioned I was going to do the Full-Time Family podcast, and I changed my mind and decided to make it kind of a series here within the Marvelous Moms podcast because I'm trying to learn simplification in my life, and things are going really well so far, in case anybody wanted to know. So today's episode is with my really, really great friend Kindle, but when you hear me refer to Full-Time Family podcast, and even the segment where I talk about our kids are going to talk at the end, I don't think I'm going to include that because they were really nervous and things didn't quite come out very audible. So what you're going to hear is my conversation with Kindle, and it's fantastic because this is a couple months ago and I'm excited to listen to it again. So if you are a homeschooler, if you've always wanted to homeschool, this is really going to resonate with you. But either way, we talk about some really, really good fundamental stuff in here about raising kids and kind of leaning into that whole like family focused lifestyle. So sit back, relax, enjoy today's episode with Kindle Garner. Kindle's one of my really, really good friends. She's somebody I met because I had a podcast. I interviewed you on Marvelous Moms Club. I don't even know how long ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah,
Something
I can't
like
even
that.
believe that. Yeah.
That's a long time ago. I was getting some memories pop up from 3 years ago of like, yeah, it was because I had signed Connor up for Khan Academy when I homeschooled him for like, you know, that 5 minutes that I tried it, but the first time. And I was like, when did I set this up? And I'm like, oh, 3 years ago is about the time when I first tried homeschooling. But you are such a good supporter of this lifestyle and such a strong advocate for it that obviously you're the one I go to and I have questions. So guys, we're going to talk a lot about homeschool life and building your full-time family in that regard, because Kindle's kind of like, you'll come to find through this interview, she's kind of the master, I don't know, artist of homeschooling. And she will probably not accept that she's wonderful, but she has been super inspiring to our family and helped me to kind of patiently lean into this life. So,
well, you're sweet. I'm more of a work in progress, I think.
We all are, though. That's the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
If people were perfect, they wouldn't be here hanging out on this podcast to be inspired and maybe get some ideas. So,
True.
Give everybody a little bit of backstory on your kids' ages, stages, your family life, kind of like what your scenario is like and all the good stuff.
Yeah, okay. So I have 3 kids. I always say that I've been homeschooling for 9 years, but I know that throws people off a little bit because my oldest is 9. And we're so like programmed to think of school as like age 5 and older or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, now there's preschool, so age 3 and older. But I really consider the way we school to be a life school. And also I was one of those freaks that kind of already had this on my heart before I had kids. I was really intentional with my motherhood. If you listen to the other podcast, you'll know why. It's all 3 of my children are adopted, and I really had to fight hard for motherhood. And it was something I spent a lot of time being intentional about. So when motherhood finally came to me, I had already had these things on my mind and on my heart. So I went and sorry, somebody just walked in.
You guys, this is the full-time family, as in she's still homeschooling. Her kids are still there.
I'm like frantically waving, go out. I'm trying to talk.
I'm trying to share what a great homeschool mom I am.
I'm trying to tell the people how effective I am at this. Oh, I love keeping it real. Anyways, right. I'll continue that thought. I was really intentional about, but it's true. I really thought that through. And I had a cute friend who was homeschooling her children that were older, and she was going to this little book club group with her kids and homeschooling. And I was asking her more questions, and the stuff she kept telling me about their education was so radical. It sounded so different from anything else I'd heard or anything I'd had experienced with education. And it sounded like so radical that it was a little bit like, oh, that sounds,
I don't know about
that
that.
sounds almost neglectful. Like that sounds kind of weird. And it kind of freaked me out. But then I was seeing her children and they were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Her 7-year-old was writing these amazing stories and they all were very proficient in things and they could hold conversations with adults and they knew a lot about gospel topics and they knew they knew how to be deep thinkers at young ages.
Mm-hmm.
And it caught my attention as to the words that she was saying and the things she was explaining about how she educates and seeing the results in her children and how it was completely different than anything the school system had ever created or anything I'd ever heard of before.
Yeah.
So I asked to join her book club and I took my newborn baby to the book club for homeschool moms. It was like a little co-op. And I was that funny lady that had no other children but a newborn attending a homeschool co-op. So anytime I see these moms that are just like so new and so fresh and they're like jumping into the homeschool world with little kids, I'm so excited for them and so proud of them because they're going to be so far ahead by the time that first official day of school comes. They're going to be so confident. But there's also a part of me that's like, it's cool. Let it go. Like, you don't have to educate for another 5 years or now I'm like 8. Like, don't even start till they're 8. They're fine to play. They can play games and sing songs and read books together and it will be okay. But I also get that nervous anticipation of like, I have to start now with my newborn. And I am proud of those mamas that start out. So, okay, that was the long explanation. I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Okay.
And my 6-year-old has special needs, so I'm homeschooling special needs, which is a new kind of adventure on its own.
Right. Yeah, that's really huge. And guys, she referred to the other podcast, meaning Marvelous Moms Club. It's actually one of the top downloaded episodes of the whole podcast. Like, I think you're number 2, which is huge because that is a really huge number of downloads that we have on there.
Yeah.
And your story has been shared to a lot of people. It's very inspiring. It's the one, and I've said this to so many people who are like, what's your favorite episode? That's always the one I say. And because I remember it having me literally like on the floor in tears, not knowing how I was going to keep the interview going because it was just so impactful. So if you guys want to go listen to that, it's amazing. And I'll list in the show notes a link to it so you guys can check it out. But anyways,
it's a neat story. And miracles are real. That's all I'm saying.
They absolutely are.
Was also so foundational in me understanding that my homeschooling, and maybe this isn't true for every homeschooler, it's probably not, but my homeschooling is a partnership with God. And that I'm not in it alone.
Yeah.
And that he cares about my kids' education. He cares about their futures. He knows their futures. He knows what they need for their lives to have their children and their children, right? He knows all of that. And that power is a real thing. And that inspiration is something that is our right as their parents.
Yeah. I love that.
That was a huge, their adoption story and my story to motherhood gave me the foundation to be a confident homeschooler as I'm raising these kids now.
Yeah. So, and that actually leads me to a question I had, because you said you were very intentional. You kind of knew and planned that you were going to homeschool your kids even before you figured out exactly what it was going to look like. Because I know that evolved over time of being exposed to these radical ideas of how people are doing school. But before that, what had led you to want to homeschool in the first place? Because you weren't raised as a homeschool kid. So what about that? Like, where was the trigger for you to even want to embark on that process?
Well, I mean, I think for every homeschool parent, we can't help but reflect on our own path of education, right? And my path was kind of ridiculous. As I look back and really take into account and surmise my entire school experience as a child, I can count on one hand the amount of teachers that stood out to me as good, right? I think there were like 4.
Right.
And I'm talking 4 out of probably 100 from the time you're in kindergarten all the way through high school.
Yeah.
I had 4 teachers that stood out. And I can give you 10 that stand out for the opposite reason because they were rough. And I have to tell you, I have to like requisite this with something that I do not think teachers are the problem because I know and love teachers and I know they're working their butts off and they are like giving their heart and soul to a program that does not give them much in return.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that to like say that teachers are the problem or that they are that I think that they're operating in a system that is really broken.
Right. Yeah.
And
they're like
trying
the
to make
Band-Aid
the
on the
best of
bullet
it.
hole.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally that.
Yep.
So in reflection of that experience in my own childhood, I can say that I think that I had a lot of teachers that whose hearts were not necessarily in it, and that they were trying to comply with a system that is deeply flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And that 99% of my memories from my early elementary time, and well, no, not just elementary, all the way through high school, were social, right?
Yeah.
I was going for social reasons,
Yep.
not necessarily academic reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And then
Which
when that's
kills
not
me.
even, when that becomes detrimental, because I know middle school is like the biggest chunk of time that I think most parents are like, oh, I would never redo that. And I hope my kids survive middle school. It's not even socially rewarding, I guess.
Yes. No, it's horrible.
So
Middle school.
where's
I
the
think can we
perk?
all just can we all raise our hands and say middle school is like the worst
It is
ever
absolutely.
with all those hormones and
Oh my
puberty and all of
gosh.
that going on?
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
worst.
So with all of that reasoning being social, so you look at the quality, and I love to bring this up because homeschoolers get badgered over socialization all the time, and all of us want to roll our eyes that are already homeschooling because we know it's not true.
Yeah.
But if we're going for, if social reasons are the reasons we're going to school because academic isn't really having an impact like it should,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of academic there, but all of it is test based and regimented, right? To be compliant with government standards. So kids get bored with that because it doesn't facilitate really deep, true knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So they're there for socialization. And if you look at the quality of socialization that's going on, is this what we want for our kids?
Right. Yeah.
You know, if we're sending them to school with the Romans, we can't be surprised when they come away with Roman values.
Yes. Okay, guys, I'm going to put this in the show notes. For all of you who are considering homeschool, if you're already indoctrinated, you don't need to see this. But if you have considered it and you just need a little push over the edge, this is such a fantastic video that...
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about because that's where I just said that from.
Yes, on YouTube. So I will post that, and it's so, so good. Such a direct, like, hello, wake up, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And you guys,
someone
of course,
else just said it even better. Someone just said it better, and I can't disclose which speaker said this because he's a homeschool dad, but he talks at high schools, and so he didn't want to broadcast out there these beliefs. But it was at a conference, and he just said it to those at the conference. But someone asked him, like, "Why are you homeschooling? Like, tell us." And he said, "I believe in marination. So that what what you're marinating in is where you soak up the juices."
Oh my gosh, that is such a good analogy.
Yeah, he's like, if you're marinating with a family and it's just like such bad visual marinating with your family. But like if you're marinating in the juices of like a loving, supportive home versus like what they're in all day long at school, that's where you suck up the most juices. Yeah. Like, that's what you become.
It's exactly true. That's a good comparison.
Yeah. So I was watching that, back to like where that came from before I had kids, is just looking back in reflection over my own journey of education. There was not much to be desired.
Yeah, right.
And the stuff that I remember looking back to as like exciting or awesome through my adult lens is like, man, that wasn't really that awesome. That was actually kind of yucky.
Yeah. Yep.
And those were not great social experiences. At the time, I thought they were fun, and I was like thrill seeking or pleasure seeking or whatever, but they weren't really valuable to my character or to, and definitely not to my academics. Mm-hmm. So why waste all that time?
Right.
If you add up the hours spent in a desk from the time they are 3 years old to the time they're 17 or 18 years old, the amount of time spent there on things that are not going to serve them is so tragic.
It's a lot. And I'm thinking somewhere like 12 to 14,000 hours of their life, I think. Yeah. Somewhere around there. I mean, it's 1,000 hours per school year. So depending on if they're full-time in kindergarten or not, that's a lot of hours. And that was a huge like wake-up call to me too. I mean, I had already decided to do homeschool, and the root cause for us, and which I've probably talked about on other episodes and I will talk about a lot, is the reason homeschooling and entrepreneurship might seem like they shouldn't go hand in hand, because it's like, how can you run a business and homeschool your children and not go insane? still working on that. We're a work in progress.
Yeah.
But the reason it flows into the others, it's like, I don't believe in sitting at a desk job for 8 hours a day just to get paid when I can work for 2 hours a day and get paid more because I'm doing what I love and I'm serving people in a different way. And when I looked at my kids a few years ago, I felt the same thing. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't send them into basically an assembly line of education when I know that they don't need to just be there for a certain amount of hours just to be there. And
Yeah.
of course, that shouldn't be the only reason that you do it. I think that for it to stick and for it to last, your why has to go a lot deeper than just not wanting them to have to waste time. But for you, it was kind of the jumping off point of what led you into, I think, more of the enriching. Is enriching a word? I don't know. I'm a homeschool mom and I should know this, but
Oh my gosh, those are my favorite. When I try to do math in my head and I'm like on the spot and then I tell people I'm in charge of teaching my children.
Anyway, it eventually got deeper, right? Like your purpose behind it,
Yes.
and the experience has gotten even bigger to the point where I feel like you could pretty much talk anybody into homeschooling. I think you could talk like a school teacher into homeschooling. I don't even know if that's a big stretch, but
Well, here's the thing that always gets me because there's always like a set of answers, and once you start homeschooling or you're getting into that world, everyone else on the outside world says they're not aware that they're all saying the same things to you all the time, right?
Yes.
Like, well, what about their socialization? And so then you kind of want to die a little bit because you're like, no, it's not even an issue. They're socializing all the time. But
Yeah.
this answer always baffles me because something I get a lot is I could never teach my children all that they need to know.
Yeah.
Or I could never teach my children all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I always think the irony in trusting a system that did not empower you to teach your own children and pass on your knowledge is the same system that you're trusting to somehow give that to your children.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You said this to me a couple months ago and I was like, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, like if you are, as an adult, having gone through the entire system of a school system plus some college, if you are still not empowered enough to teach your children at least elementary school, why in the world would you trust that same system to somehow educate your children?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that right there.
When we can't even admit that we can't even teach them ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's the thing with homeschooling. It is accessible to everyone, and I mean that on any financial level, on any level of loving home. It doesn't matter how much money you make or where you live. If you have a loving home with a functional parent, you can do this. Because
and do you have to be the most patient parent ever too? Go finish your sentence first.
Oh my gosh.
Because you can learn what?
No, did you hear? You heard me swiping my child in the air saying, "Get out of here." No, definitely not. The whole point of it is, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this reference because it's like so inspiring to me, but Little Women, Marmee, best mother character written ever.
Yeah.
If you want to learn how to mother, read Marmee, and you have to read it because the movie doesn't capture it.
Right. Okay.
Jo has a moment in the book where she's like got this terrible temper, right? And she says to Marmee, how are you so good and so kind and so this? And Marmee says, I'm not, I have a terrible temper. And Jo is like, what, Marmee? And she's like, don't you ever notice when I leave the room quietly and like purse my lips? And it's the moment in the book where you're like, oh my gosh, Marmee just has self-control. She's just as mad as the rest of us.
Right. She just knows how to purse her lips instead of flap them and scream through them.
Yes. This is the beauty of homeschool. Okay, I can tell you all day long like negatives about the school system and why that we should take our kids home because there's so many negatives and so many hard things in the school system. There's a lot of good things too. I don't want to just say that it's all bad because I know that's not true.
Yeah.
But I also know there's a lot of negative that could bring you home. But at the end of the day, that is not sustainable for your homeschool. You have to be doing it for reasons that are positive and that are different than just simply it sucks there, right? It has to be, it's so much more positive at home.
Yeah.
No, it is not perfect. It is not perfect. No family is. But what I get from being at home with my kids is so much greater than any negative I would get from the school system or any other reason.
Right.
That it enforces what I want to do in a way that is so positive, and that also gives me the sustainability of like, this is what I want. I want to set the bar high for my family.
Yeah.
It means that we're sitting around the table together learning how to do algebra, and I am learning and finding resources in my community. The whole socialization thing, I'm like, do you know how resourceful you have to be as a homeschool parent? I'm constantly finding mentors for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly finding opportunities for them to go to a certain place and learn something new, and have a field trip to understand how the power plant works, or how waste management works, or how to run a business.
Yeah.
All those things are real world experiences, and then we're doing them together.
Right.
I will never forget the moment my child figured out how to read and it clicked.
Yeah.
And I got that moment as her mom, and we got it together, and it formed connection between the two of us in something hard accomplished.
Yeah.
I didn't give it away to a teacher that has that experience with 100 other kids in the classroom and has to meet deadlines.
Right. That is so beautiful. And that's really kind of, I mean, we can sit, like you said, and we can talk about all the reasons to homeschool, but at the end of the day, and the whole premise of this podcast and this whole movement and our mission really as a family is to bring the focus back to family. And what better way to do that than by spending more time together? And it is crazy to me how many of us are anxious to send our children away so we have a break. But I'm like, you only get so many years with these little people, and you only get 1 year of them being 4 and 1 year of them being 5. And then it gets away from you. And they only get that one time. Childhood is so fast for us as parents, even though, you know, how they say like the days are long, but the years are short. And just to bring that focus back to like having those moments with each other and not giving them away to somebody else. I love how you said that.
No, and I am becoming the woman I want to be because I have chosen to take it on, right? Like, believe me, every single mom that's full-timing it knows exactly what it feels like to need a break and to question like, oh my gosh, it would be so nice if they were gone all day. I would be the best homeschooler if my kids were gone all day at school. I'd be so good at this if they would just leave.
Right.
But here's the thing. It forces me to have to control my temper. It forces me to have to confront things within myself that are hard. It forces me to be more patient and to pay attention to their little world and to focus on what's important in my life. It keeps our eternal perspective intact all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard. Yes, there are moments where we just say, forget it, and we're going swimming today instead of doing math because we're all in each other's hair. But all the trade-off is totally worth it. And I love that I'm all of a sudden learning so much about myself and about how to run a household and how to master my own things.
Right.
That's invaluable.
And you're relearning stuff that you binged on when you were 7 and 8, but now you're actually learning it for real. Like it's sinking in. Do you know, I'm going to embarrass myself really badly right now. I never retained what a long vowel was and a short vowel was. I could not for the life of me ever remember what that was. And today I learned, like, it was just a simple little thing. It clicked from our Good and the Beautiful curriculum. And it was like long vowels sound like the letter. And I was like, oh, literally, I get it now. And I'm like, wow, there's so many things. I know this isn't something you need to know all the time, but it's just those things you don't realize how much slides right by that is not retained. And I guess it's retained enough I know how to pronounce words, but it's just kind of nice to be learning again, but in a way that it's just making sense, and it's actually a lot more fun. I've totally gained a bigger hunger for education in just the few, I mean, we kind of did some homeschooling over the summer, so this isn't like I've learned a lot in the last week ever since we started this. It's really been an evolution of like, oh, this is going to be fun. I'm going to learn more than they are because I'm like super interested in these things now.
So fun. It is so fun. You have to know, teaching history to my kids is the most joyful thing for me. I love to teach my kids history, and I'm all of a sudden going, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that. And I'm a religious homeschooler, but I think even secular homeschoolers can understand this. But putting history into context by reading original documents and all of a sudden starting to understand it in a different way, and delve in a little bit deeper, even especially from a religious standpoint, adding back in religion back into my history for my kids is revolutionary
Yeah.
as far as teaching them the gospel principles. Like, that was removed.
Right.
And when you add it back in, all of a sudden you get this whole picture that is a completely different vision than what you thought. And all of a sudden it rings with truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
That to me is so valuable, to be able to give my children the whole picture instead of whatever's removed because of law.
Right.
And I'm even talking from if you want to be if you're a secular homeschooler, the whitewashing of history, like going back through and realizing where things have been rewritten or where they've been led astray for our standardized curriculum in our country. It's like shocking.
Yeah.
It totally is shocking. And it lights a fire, because all of a sudden you're creating a love of learning for yourself as it happens naturally for your children.
So awesome. What would you say are like the 3 things that you would want somebody who does not homeschool to know, or myths that you want to debunk, so that people can kind of walk away with like, oh, they're not weird. They're really actually doing a cool thing. And it's not, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like we have to defend ourselves per se, but just things that you wish you could grab people on the street and let them know about homeschool, that we, even if we've kind of already covered it, just a few things.
I'm giggling a little bit because you're like, to let people know we're not weird. And I'm like, no, we're completely weird.
We are the minority, but we're not okay, we're a little weird.
No, but here's the thing. For the first time ever, it used to be looked at as like a bad thing, or, you know, like weird is just code for different. But the more we get into it, I'm realizing that, okay, we are different. But here's the thing. Instead of trying to justify why that's wrong, all of a sudden I'm realizing that we're different, and it's amazing.
Right.
And I want to own it. I'm like, we're weird. Yes. We are going to own it. We are going to own that we are different, and we're doing things a different way, and that might feel or look different to the status quo and to the population or to the popular vote, because we are weird. My kids do go and have full conversations with adults.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the standards of today, that looks a little different. Most kids don't do that. They're lumped into groups of children their same age.
Right.
So socialization is happening, but it does look different, and I think that difference is beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
And amazing.
I agree.
So I guess if I had to pick 3, I mean, the socialization thing is always there, or the most common thing that people bring up. So there's that. Is that, yes, socialization is different. You can call it weird if you want, but it's different, but it's beautiful. And it's its own animal that is really cool to watch your children embrace.
Right.
Second myth would probably have to be that you can't do it. I think every parent thinks that they can't do it, or that they're not empowered enough to do it. I am a hairstylist by trade. And I feel like I have a bachelor's degree right now in history or in science or whatever we're doing, because I am learning so much with my kids, and there's so many resources now. I mean, I think maybe 30 years ago you could get away with saying like, I'm not qualified, and feeling that way, and you just have to work harder. But right now it's literally at our fingertips.
Yeah.
All the time.
Right. Right.
And enough resources to fill boatloads of anything you want to know.
There's almost so much
at our
that
fingertips.
You have too many choices. Like, there's so many,
Yeah.
there's so much access. You have to pace yourself a little bit, because you can sign up for 20 different free resources. You can buy things. You can buy workbooks at Costco if you wanted to, and teach your children through them, and they're going to get, everything they need in all the subjects. So there really is. It's like a no excuse zone. I love that. Anybody can do it.
The resources,
they're out there.
The resources are amazing. The other thing off the top of my head is that homeschool does not have to be school recreated at home.
Yes, this is the biggest thing
Your children,
you taught me, and that you've helped me prepare to not go crazy and not feel like we're missing something, or that it's not miserable when you're not trying to create the school environment at home. Totally.
And I think some homeschoolers, every family is going to look so different. That's what's so unique about homeschool, is every school is not like the other. They're all going to look really different based on your family values, and based on your schedules, and based on all of that stuff. But I think a lot of moms, when they first jump off that conveyor belt, just have the vision of what school was to them and they try to recreate it. And I think it's a recipe for burnout really quick.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've brought all the like negative stuff from school home, right?
Right.
That's like, that kind of defeats the purpose of being home, which is a nurturing and different kind of environment.
Yeah.
So I think embracing the home environment for what it is and working into that is invaluable, and kind of shifting your mindset of education and what it looks like.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't necessarily have to look like what the public school system has put in place, and that there's a lot of ways to educate your child. And it doesn't also have to be within a regimented amount of time. It can be 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day or however long it takes for your child for that day. And it doesn't have to be all encompassing. So that also looks like a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
Which is like amazing, but also a little bit intimidating when you're used to control.
Right.
Or used to things being laid out. The thought of having to be at the school every morning at 8 o'clock and at 3 o'clock for school pickup, and to only take my vacations or my days off with the school vacation it's anxiety inducing to me. Because once you know the freedom on the other side, it's amazing to have all that freedom. But what that also brings is sometimes insecurity. Like, am I doing enough? Am I doing this?
Right.
Because we want to compare, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So getting off of that comparison trap and reframing what education looks like to your specific family, and being brave enough to have faith, especially that first year and the first couple of years, being brave enough to let it be what it is, knowing it's not going to be perfect, knowing that your kids might need to detox for a little while from any other forms of education that have been hammered into them through repetition, knowing that they're probably going to have to detox and that it won't look perfect that year. Just having the faith to go forward anyways.
Yeah.
And to know that you'll learn as you go is a huge, huge step. And having the faith to look at other homeschoolers further ahead for mentorship and say, look, it works and it's okay.
Yeah.
And little by little, you kind of let go of that control and start to paint this new picture, and the brush strokes are brilliant and beautiful. It's like the difference of a masterpiece created by you and the difference between something mass created, right? It's always better in person. When you see that Picasso in person and you get to, or not even Picasso, I don't even like Picasso, which is, I know, controversial. But let's say Van Gogh or Renoir, okay? Yeah. Monet, yes. All Monet. Those tiny little brush strokes. And how beautiful it is in person when you look up close and you see the spirit just pouring out of it. This person's expression on paper or on canvas is there. Yeah. Versus a print on a poster. Yep. Right? Totally. It is that big of a difference.
I love that. I love that comparison, because it is like, and we were kind of going over this lesson with the kids the other day of, do you consider your life a work of art? And they kind of looked at me like, what? But it's kind of exactly how you just framed that, is really you can create a masterpiece versus, and not saying that having your kids in public school, you're not going to have a masterpiece of a life, because I really believe that these principles can be applied all the time to your family. It's just about being intentional. And it is about like making sure that you have a hand in the creation of your family culture, and not just, going with the flow and following the pattern of what is socially acceptable or what is the norm, and really defining for your own family what kind of a masterpiece that you're going to create. And I think that's like the central message, right?
I agree. I think the biggest difference, because intentional parents are going to have awesome kids. Yeah. It's just going to happen because you're intentional and you love your kids. That's a non-negotiable for really functioning families. Yeah. I think what the difference is time. Yeah. Time. Yep. You have time together, time to marinate together and to avoid the yuck together, and you're doing it together. Before you asked earlier, like what led me to homeschool before, and I was talking about just my own experiences, but also this is just a little fun side note. My husband and I lived in Colorado for a while, and we snowboarded a ton, and we're really into snowboarding, and we're really young and having a lot of fun before we had kids and having all this time for freedom, right? Yes. No, and I remember we met a family of snowboarding teenagers and kids, and we were like, how do they snowboard? And they said, well, we homeschool so we could snowboard during the day and then we do school at night. And I just remember thinking, what? How that is so cool. Like you can snowboard all day and then do school in the afternoon or evening. And what a cool family. And they were so close. Like the kids were just having so much fun together. And I remember that spark of like, I want that. I don't want, like, I want to do that together. I want to do that as a family.
Yeah.
And that freedom is just, that time together and that freedom is irreplaceable, and there's no other way to create it.
Right. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad you talked a lot about time, because I really kind of throughout the podcast, the only kind of flow I've been thinking about is really wanting to focus on those 3 words in our title, full-time family, like what fulfills you. And I think we've kind of gone over that a little bit. I mean, obviously it's a really fulfilling thing to do overall, and it's a sacrifice, and anytime you make a sacrifice, you're fulfilled and blessed in the end. And then the time, like there's such a huge time win when it comes to homeschool, and a lot of people look at it in the negative. They think like, well, I won't have any time. You get really creative on how to stretch a day, right? And especially if you have early rising kids like ours, so it's actually overwhelming because there's so much time. And I'm like, how are we going to fill all this time? Instead of I don't have enough of it, I'm like, I have too much of it. And that's a great problem to have, right?
Oh, absolutely. Boredom breeds creativity.
Yes. I love that you say that. You guys, okay, so let me just toot Kindle's horn a little bit and tell you how much you need to make sure that you're following her on social media. You have helped and transformed my initial journey to where I feel like a lot of the shock and the expectation has been kind of set at a realistic pace for me in homeschooling. Like, I'm not going into this with this idealistic view, idealistic in the right way, I guess, where I'm like, it's going to be beautiful and it's going to be amazing, but I know it's going to be a challenge. You just have such amazing perspective that people need to hear. And if this is a journey that you want to take and an avenue that you want to go down, you need a guide. Don't try and figure this out for yourself, because you will quit so quickly when you realize all these little elements that you couldn't have possibly anticipated or prepared for unless somebody helped you. So I'm just going to plug you right here, because I think it's really important that people know
you're awesome.
I wouldn't be doing this if not for Kindle. And I've interviewed a lot of homeschool moms, and they've all given me little pieces of the pie. But Kindle, you really bring it full circle, and you can tell, like, you're so passionate about it. I'm sure people can tell just from listening to this episode. This is really, really important to you. This has created the culture of your family. I've seen it. I love watching your family together. I love watching you as a mom. I know you're not the perfect mom. You're like the first to say that, but you inspire me. And I think that's key, is like you're inspiring other moms to just do it, even though there's no perfection. It's just, it's your intention. And
that is so sweet of you to say. This is the thing, is it really is my passion. Like I want moms to know that they can do it, and that there's no difference between me and anyone else. Like we're all in it together, and you're not alone, and it's okay to be afraid and do it anyways, because the payoff is amazing.
Yeah. Well, if we can't, y'all, if you can't tell after listening to this episode, then I mean, keep re-listening to it, because it is a beautiful thing. And I'm blessed that this is part of our life right now because of the way you've inspired me. So
I love what you said earlier about one more thing.
Go ahead.
But I was just thinking about entrepreneurship and homeschooling, and the thing that they have in common is that you're totally bucking the system, right? Mm-hmm. For the first time ever, we have this generation that's like, I can make my own money.
Yes.
I don't need anyone to tell me how to do it. And I don't want to be sitting at a corporate job every day in a desk all day. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be, I don't want anyone else to tell me what my limit is.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And for the first time ever, this millennial generation, I know a lot of people give the millennials a hard time, but I think that they get it on a different level than any generation before, that they don't want to be told what to do anymore. And they're empowered to create it themselves on a level that is unprecedented.
Yes, 100%.
Right?
Yep.
And they're like, I'm going to create my own wealth. And the homeschooling model fits so well into that ideation and that evolution, because it's the same thing. All of a sudden, we're like jumping off that system, and we're like, whoa, I feel joy here.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so much joy.
I feel creativity. Yes, there's risk, because guess what? At the end of the day, I'm like, my neck is the one on the line,
Yes.
right? For all of, like my kids, all of us, like nobody, I can't look back and be like, well, the school system did it
Yeah.
or my boss did it
Right.
or whatever. I have to just be like, it's me, it's all me. I have to take accountability for every action and what the consequence was.
Totally.
But also, the joy in that is that when there is success, it's hard won and it's freedom.
Yes.
And it's on your terms. Your life is on your terms.
I love it.
So I love that comparison because that's all we're doing is living life on our terms. And the payoff is that we are closer, we are connected, we are feeling joy, and we are leaving the world behind because we're living in a holier purpose.
Amen. A to the men, Kindle. You're amazing. Okay. Again, I will link to all things Kindle because she's amazing and you need to be her friend and connect with her and learn from her. She has some amazing other resources. You have created a co-op with a friend of yours, Randy, which is really amazing, a nature co-op. And there's probably a lot more coming.
Yeah,
from you.
anyone, totally. Anyone wanting to have a community where they live and to like nip this socialization thing in the bud for permanent.
Yes.
Yeah, the Kindred Cooperative. We have a whole system and a whole program
I love it.
for making communities where you live.
Cool. Well, you're inspiring, and I think it's time that we let the kids take this over.
And that's where we're going to end this because, as I said in the beginning, the conversation was a nice, slow, quiet one. And bless their hearts, I'm so grateful they had that opportunity to try. But maybe we'll visit it again on another future episode. For now, though, this one's over. I hope you've gotten so much value and you're just, maybe your mind's a little bit more open to the idea of homeschooling, or you've just picked up some good nuggets from the content with Kindle. I didn't officially close it out with her, so I'm just going to end by saying thank you so much, Kindle, for always sharing your heart, for inspiring me to be a good mom in every single way, not just from homeschooling. And you guys, make sure you are following her. I will link to all things Kindle, and I hope you have a marvelous day. We'll see you on the next episode. It has been almost 4 years since the Marvelous Mom Show launched, which is crazy. And even though we're an older show, we can still be new to so many people. If you will do me a favor and go leave a 5-star rating, please 5 stars, and review over on iTunes, then it helps our show be discovered by more moms who need these stories and these amazing messages in their lives. So head over to iTunes, if you're an iPhone user, your podcast app, and leave us a rating and review so that we can continue to bring you more amazing episodes and be found by all kinds of marvelous moms across the universe. So thanks for doing that. I appreciate you, and I'm so grateful that you're here. You are a marvelous mom.